our council meeting discussing the long-term plan. It's 9:32 a.m. We'll start the meeting with the Karakia.
Whakatakata ki te uru, whakatakata ki te tonga, kia makinakina ki uta, kia mataratara ki tai, e he aka ana te atakura, he teo, he huka, he hohu, tihei mauri ora.
Kia ora. Hey, thank you for that, Mr. Chief Executive. Thank you, councillors, for joining us again in the room. Always helpful when we're in the same place to discuss these types of matters. I thought just before we get into it, I thought I would just note for councillors that after our meeting finished yesterday at 4 o'clock, we had a Zoom meeting with the regional sector. And as part of that, we had a bit of a roundtable on where is everybody landing in the LTP space. And I just thought for some context, I'd let you know that for 4 of them, they're sitting in the 20 to 25% space, just to give you a feel for where that's at. There was 4 that were around the mid to late teens. And then there were another 4 that were sort of that 9.5 down to where we're sitting right now at the 6. Pardon me? And I'm just putting it out there, Councillor Smith, just for some context.
I had contact yesterday with another one and they're at 2.4.
I know the one that you're referring to, that is not the number they're going out to for consultation with.
They're leaving it to their constituents to make the decision between that and 11.5. So.
Yes, yeah. So an interesting, also not a race to the bottom, I suppose, too. Just wanted to put that out there for councillors, just as some context as we work through our discussions today. All right, we still have a raft of work ahead of us. We made good progress yesterday, and I really appreciate when we've got matters where there seems to be some consensus, there seems to be a level of comfort. The quicker we can move through those, then the more time we have to spend on the items where we would like to go into more in-depth debate on the way forward. So we're going to start today with the coastal and marine. And then we took care of the maritime services yesterday. So then we'll continue through sequentially. And at the end, after all of the business cases, we will revisit the biodiversity biosecurity one. They're still doing some financial modeling on that, just based on some of our decisions yesterday. So that's just giving you a lay of the land. I do really hope that we can get through all the business cases today and even have time to move on to the groups of activities. So we'll set that as our ambitious target. We'll do the day in 3 sections again. So we'll have about an hour and a half now. We'll have a break. We'll go another hour and a half, have lunch, and then another hour and a half after that. And again, we will endeavor to finish around 3 o'clock. So we've got some time at the end of the day. Okay, so we'll crack on to the coastal and marine strategic priority. So this is page 42 and also page 445 for the detail of the business case. Tracy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, councillors. Unfortunately, you have to hear me for another 2 of these and then you'll get a break from my voice. So that's great for all of us. So this is you've had the detailed business case now for our coastal and marine strategic priority. We have incorporated into that business case comments that councillors shared with us in December. I think importantly, based on the biodiversity conversation we had yesterday, I do just want to highlight for councillors when we're talking in biodiversity and the biodiversity and biosecurity business case, that predominantly is terrestrial biodiversity. So there is provision in this business case to increase investment in coastal and marine biodiversity. It's an incremental investment. I will remind councillors of comments I made in December that we haven't invested in this space through any LTPs in 9 years. We had no investment in our coastal and marine environmental monitoring or science, no increase investment in the last LTP or the LTP before that. So it is time. It is a third of our region. It is a significant part of the region and is a significant receiving environment. The 3 bullet points up there, it is really around the information gaps and will assist us to implement our coastal plan and see if we've got some of the triggers and thresholds right. In accordance with, sorry, is there all good? In accordance with the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement, we had to identify degraded water bodies in the coastal plan. Our coastal plan presently identifies the Firth of Thames and Whakatau Lagoon. So both have implications from a water quality perspective, and also to refer back to our State of the Environment monitoring report. I have Mike with me, and I was thinking yesterday I introduced everybody as Mike and Thomas. Dr. Michael Townsend with me, Mike, who was the author of the business case, so can respond to any questions, Madam Chair.
Sure.
The first line talks about encompasses 1/3 of our region, and you've just talked about 1/3 of the region. To me, a coastline isn't a region. So explain, please, how you make up 1/3 of the region from a coastline.
Yep, so our spatial extent for the Waikato region, as identified in statutory maps that were developed in the 1989 local government restructure, goes out to the
You talk about the 12-mile limit.
12-mile limit. So that is 1/3 of the entire region over which we have governance.
Right, okay.
So including the coastline and that area, it is 1/3 of our region. We don't often think of our region extending out that far. We commonly look at
Can't
land.
get too many
That's the way it was
constituent
written.
calls from the fish.
Yeah,
So-
no, it's just the way it was
Yeah.
written and focusing on coastline, but okay, I get it now. Thank you.
Probably.
But we regulate the fish that Warren catches.
That is a very big conversation if you want to know what we regulate in that coastal marine area, subject of many workshops.
All right. Sorry, was there any further presentation you wanted to go into, or?
No, I think that's a great introduction from Tracy. I would just add that obviously coastal and marine environment is critical to the people who live on the shores, the importance there, but it's important to everyone, regardless of whether or not we go and actively engage or whether we stay inland. We're still receiving the benefits of a well-managed and healthy marine environment.
Thank you. All right, I've got Councillor Dunbar-Smith and then Councillor Nicol.
Yeah, the aquaculture guys do a lot of water monitoring themselves because they're obliged to under consents. What access do we have to that, and how do we use it?
That is a tricky one. From the perspective of there is difference between kind of consent compliance monitoring and state of the environment monitoring. There's a series of reports from 2015 that we commissioned that looked at the way in a perfect world, in a better world, we would integrate all of the data that is accessible to us. For the moment, we are in a place where those are separated in the ways that we manage consent and compliance data here. So we don't have access to all that data. We do utilize some data where we can, but largely those are still separate. And that was one of the things I talked about in the strategic outline case around how we handle consent data. So we have worked with Coromandel Marine Farming Association. We still work with them, and we are looking at better ways of utilizing data and making sure that we are not ignoring or replicating data that already exists.
Because they have to monitor after floods and things like that to make sure that the water quality is sufficient to be able to harvest. So there would be regular monitoring going on about water quality. It would seem to me that if the Firth has got issues, that would be one of the things you'd certainly use. And secondly, what's happened to NIWA and why are they pulling out?
Yep. Okay. So the first one, I think they monitor fortnightly for various parameters, not all parameters, and certainly that would add some texture to an overall assessment of the Firth. Our monitoring of the Firth is around both a temporal and a spatial measurement across the Firth. So we couldn't solely rely on just aquaculture data in terms of those locations. But yes, would add some richness. And as I say, with regards to monitoring, we are looking at ways of improving that in the future. So in terms of using the same equipment, using the same calibration, so all of that sits together, so it can be used in the most kind of harmonious way possible. In terms of NIWA, I can't really speak for NIWA. Across my understanding, across science sectors, across CRIs, there are financial pressures on them. They have reprioritized. They have pulled out of other large-scale monitoring, the rivers network, in terms of their prioritization. But their mooring, which is in the outer Firth of Thames, yeah, my understanding is there's not currently a plan to reinstate that.
And also page 457, you've got the map. It looks like most of our monitoring is going to be in the lower Firth rather than out where the aquaculture is.
On that map. Yes. Yep. Yep, that monitoring structure is focused around depth contours, moving out kind of 5, 10, 15 meters. The Firth of Thames, in terms of, just to make sure we're not, the semantics of it, is considered as a line from kind of Mania Harbour kind of across. So then we're talking about the outer Firth and Hauraki Gulf beyond that. So this is the design specifically for what I'm identifying as the Firth of Thames.
So if the Firth of Thames is a degraded water body, to what extent is that coming from Auckland as well?
Predominantly from what we are, the things in which it has been classed as degraded in terms of low oxygen and in terms of pH. These will be predominantly coming from the inner Firth, from the rivers, in terms of the levels of eutrophication sediments, which are leading to these this classification. So it's not, whilst there is obviously kind of nutrient exchange with the outer Firth, this is not an Auckland problem that we are inheriting. It's predominantly us.
Okay. And then finally, in terms of sediment, obviously when you get huge downpours on the Coromandel, you get a lot of sediment. Is not much you can do about that, is there? What's the suggestions around how you, when you're monitoring it, but what can you do when you have roads collapse into the harbour and things like that?
Yep. So sediment is probably, one of our number one issues in the coastal space. Obviously, that kind of interacts and temporally its interaction with kind of climate change, depending on what kind of scale you're looking at. Yes, obviously, in terms of big events and events that will change over time, in terms of those repeat storm periods, very, very difficult to manage every single place all of the time under those events. However, if we look at land use, if we look at some of the places where we saw big issues associated with certain land use types around forestry, the sedimentations I've recorded in places like Wharakawa, Whangamata, clearly there is a link between how we manage the catchments, the activities we undertake, and the effects on the coastal environment. I'm not going to say we're going to be able to stop all sediment plumes forevermore if we invest X amount of effort, but we certainly can modify how we're impacting the marine environment and the kind of the frequency of those kind of sediment plumes and their duration. So in certain places we will see those. They can be relatively short compared to those which kind of persist for long periods of time.
I think,
you.
Madam Chair, also to respond to that, on the back of one good thing that did come out of the floods last year, and the whole weather events, I think, is we've got some really good data now, and our spatial information team are using that data to develop some predictive models. So we're actually able to determine not only what has happened, but given X event, X type event in this type of area, we can expect to see these impacts on the land. So we'll have some of that more future looking predictive modelling, which I think is a richness we've not had before.
Councillor Nicol.
Thanks. Hi there. I had somebody mention to me the other day about the Hauraki Gulf not being that far away from being a dead zone. So mentioned something like 25 years should it all trend the way it is. Is that correct? Or something along those lines? Because I know the state of the Gulf says it's a degraded water body, but does that sound about right?
I'm not sure on
Okay.
that specific prediction. One of the things I would say in terms of the tipping points and the fear of tipping points is very, very difficult to predict. The only way we found out how to find them is to cross them thus far. So, there's been concerns around the Firth for a good period of time, but obviously in the direction we're tracking in terms of climate change exacerbating things, affecting things like oxygen saturation. So the lack of oxygen will become more of a problem in a warmer future. It's certainly moving in that direction.
Okay, thanks. And I appreciate your comment before on saying that a lot of it is coming from the Waikato side. I can imagine there's a lot of dilution from the Auckland side that helps that out a bit. And I was surprised to see in the report that we don't actually contribute as much as Auckland to the Hauraki Gulf, State of the Gulf report data set. Although I shouldn't be after going through all the coastal plan process with you, but it would be really cool to contribute to that, considering our impact on the Firth of Thames. Really keen to support that increased monitoring that you're proposing there, and that's already happening for the Waiho and Piako river mouths and such. Finally, I thought it was interesting in the report as well. It said about it's hard to assess the value of ICM activities, and there was something else about our activities contributing to having effects on the sensitive receiving environment. And so I just wanted to explore that a bit, because my understanding is that, we'd have consents for those activities that we do. Wouldn't part of those consents be to monitor the downstream effects? And if so, is there a reason why that doesn't extend to the Firth in itself anyway? Might be a question for Brent, or I'm not sure, but it's just keen to understand that, because you would not want to be in a situation where we, as a regulator, give consents to ourselves, that those consents aren't very tight around the receiving environments we're impacting. That was something I just took from reading it. So if you have any feedback, I'm just interested. It's a sensitive topic.
Yeah, I think that the point there is, again, it's monitoring the effects of our activities on the environment as opposed to monitoring the environment.
Right.
So I would think there are, the conditions that you would put on a consent for monitoring need to be related to the activity. If that was to extend into the Firth of Thames, how could you directly attribute it to one particular activity, which is the exact differentiation between consent-based activities and state of the environment monitoring.
Claire, so our conditions are likely to be closer to the activity.
If I may, also on that, I think so some of those words are kind of directly from that kind of operative review, but I'd also flip that in terms of the positive impacts in terms of those ICM activities, not necessarily consented activities,
positive or negative,
but the kind of riparian planting and the various activities actually being able to measure the net benefit of that, and broadly speaking, it was around there just not quite being enough data to really show the values of those sorts of things.
Yeah, no, I'm a real fan of us doing more environmental monitoring too, and then anything to help demonstrate the productivity of our work. It's got to be a positive thing. But yeah, for me, a large part of looking at this business case was that we don't, what I want to bring to this is that we don't want to undercook this after not delivering on it for so long. And so, because ultimately it's everybody that loses out. The Hauriki Golf Forum recently did that whole natural capital review of the golf and how much it's worth to us. So we don't want to lose more of that. So I'd be looking at the preferred option in your business case, but I'm keen to explore after I've let some other people speak, what some of the other topics are from the better option that could be added after we've explored which ones would be really worthwhile. Yeah. So, but just as a heads up, they are the things like extending to the Whuratoa Lagoon, since it's in degraded water body as well, and it's nice to be equal across degraded parts of our region. And the SOND tech purchase, the additional estuary water quality monitoring, the extension of the Mataranga Māori piece, and that's mainly for a similar reason I raised yesterday about signalling long term about commitment. So that wouldn't necessarily be increasing anything in the next few years, but just making sure the signal's in there to give that confidence. And the two favourite ones, I think at the moment, would be the intertidal habitat mapping, because the 99.5% seagrass loss over 10 years is pretty scary. And it'd be really interesting to know whether over 5 years, or if possible even more frequent, whether you're losing 99.5% in 1 year, or in 5 years, or in 10 years. And the rocky reef health was really important. I think so. Just as a heads up, those are keen to explore what those cost and if those might be worth adding.
Okay, I'm just trying to look through that business case and find those the better. It's under, okay. It would be helpful if we had consistency of approach on some of these business cases, so we're not moving from a multicolored table to some other approach of communicating with us on that. Just a note to whoever's listening. All right. Hey, thank you for that, Councillor Nicol. Councillor Marr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Mike, look, totally in support of this business case. In fact, I actually think you've undersold it. As we mentioned, a third of our region is coastal, and we're only looking at increasing the monitoring in that lower Firth area. Understanding the lower Firth is a different marine environment to the outer Firth and what's going on. And contrary to some of the concerns of my fellow councillors that we're hammering the farmers for what's going in, I just want confidence that the monitoring is actually going to basically pick up things like our estuary flow, the sediment going in, the levels, resuspension, what's going on through that spot. The big effect, as Ben touched on, the weather events, see it all round the Coromandel, certainly, that flooding events, storm events, and that create huge sediment blooms throughout all our harbours and estuaries. Also picking up on the fact that you've got there in the business case, just talking with local involvement. We've got flounder fishermen. A lot of people don't realise there's actually prawns in that lower Firth, that sort of thing. They live in that muddy sediment bottom and that sort of thing. So it isn't a dead space as such, but getting information back from those guys on what they've seen over the years. Also the Mataranga Maori side of things, just with 118,000, does that also kick into the Te Ao Maori case that's coming before us a bit later, or is that completely separate?
Separate.
So that's separate. So that 118,000, is that FTE, or is it extra staff, or it wasn't noted?
Yep. So the kind of general plan at the moment, and obviously thinking about going through a co-development step over the first year, that would be to fund time, predominantly a kind of 1 day a week kind of kaitiakitanga, who also has an additional project around SOE, and then there being some expenses for kind of hui, recognising people's time and organising those types of events.
Okay. So that just moves me into the expenses and things like that. Page 473, we've got servicing of buoys, 184K, buoy procurement, 270, there's more servicing, 33. You stated the yearly cost currently to monitor is 300,000. That's only 2 buoys in place and 10 other manual monitored sites. It just doesn't sound like the figures that have come through in the budget are actually enough.
Right. Okay. Yep. I can talk to all of that. Maybe start with. I think one of the key things in terms of, you highlighted some of the issues and across stressors and across space. One of the things is this business case adds to our existing capability. It's not a zero at the moment. In terms of the expertise in my team, people like Dr. Steve Hunt, his understanding of sediment dynamics is kind of exceptional, and yeah, across the country. So being able to integrate different measures, direct empirical measures, use of satellite images, some of his work on the West Coast to do with sediment plumes. So we are kind of really pushing the boundaries and moving in that direction. And also with some of our existing CapEx, so in terms of the ability to look at weather events, we've had equipment deployed in the Waihau recently. We're out next week again. So we are understanding, we are investing our time and efforts in the spatial and temporal understanding. And that's what we've got so far. This business case will help to refresh, re-energize, and replace, update some of the equipment that we need. And so yes, appreciate around the Mataronga and maybe extending that a little bit more. Yep. In terms of the costing, so at the moment we have the buoys. We don't really have servicing in place for those, and we have the kind of Firth of Thames kind of monitoring program, and the kind of growing costs of that. This business case, as I say, integrates with our existing funding, and we believe, we understand that this will deliver kind of what we have outlined. Yes, you can always add in an extra 100K, and if something fails, all that. But we feel at the moment this is a kind of a good prediction, not too under, not too over, and we'll be able to deliver that. And again, over the over the 10 years, particularly with the Firth of Thames monitoring, at the next LTP, we'll be able to explore, exactly, is this exactly the scale of the program we need? What do we need for the following 3 years after that?
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to outline that it is on top of existing funding, and I understand the pressures we put on you for constraints of funding as we move into this budget. And yeah, it's just really critical for me that state of the environment, it indicated the lacking information that we are seeing in the data spread across our coastal and marine environment. So thanks for your input, Mike.
Thanks for that, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Mike, thanks for your presentation. I'm all for monitoring. I don't have any problems because we have to measure what you can measure, you can manage. But I want to go back a stage. I think we're putting the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. And I use the example of Waikato. Anybody who's a regular user of the Waikato boat ramp will know the sediment keeps building up in there, and some of it's obviously from weather events, which have been going on since Adam was a small boy in short pants. So there's nothing new there. It's a significant cost to clear it, but I've not seen anything done to try and mitigate that runoff. Now we know where it's coming from, up in the hills, but are we doing any work? Is there any research being done to find ways of stopping those events causing the sort of degradation of the waterways? Because that sediment goes straight out into the Firth. You can't stop it. Once it gets down there, it's too late. It's got to be stopped further up in the farmland. So I'd like to think that we are committing some time and effort, and not obviously necessarily dollars, into researching how we can actually stop those occurring. That's only just one example. So yeah, I want to move it. Our monitoring is important because that tells us what's happened, but it doesn't stop it happening. And I want to see us focusing on ways of actually stopping that occurring. And you might get some assistance and funding from the likes of the boat ramp and other interested parties who will also want to see this continuous degradation of the waterways stopped, because it costs them money to clear it. You know, there's a cause and effect, and there's significant cost. So if we can reduce that cost, then they may well be prepared to fund it. And the other issue that I've got is we know from reports and from personal experience that a number of the snapper and this probably leads in from Jennifer's point about the dying of the Gulf. Snapper are apparently particularly the younger ones who can't compete to feed, they're starved, and that's showing up on the health of the fish. Which one's suggestion is that that's a result of sediment settling in the Gulf, and particularly in the upper part of the Firth, the Thames. So you know, that to me is sending us a strong signal that this has to stop. Otherwise, we're going to lose our fisheries. Because if the younger ones are starting to die, they grow bigger and they're going to disappear as well. Thank you.
Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, Chair. I think Warren summed it up really well. So I'm just going to try and add a few small extras. I'm again coming at this from outside. I'm still wondering a little bit about integration. So you know, we have biodiversity, biosecurity, coastal marine, and I'm just seeking a bit of assurance about how we are adequately integrating the operation, because to me, I'll come back to it's the coastal land interface, which is the critical zone where most of the issues arise. And of course, you do mention estuaries and stuff like that in there, but I'm just still not quite confident that because of the way we define, for example, our coastal plan, which was actually didn't really address the issues on that coastal frontage, I would call it the coastal front, as referred to in the RMA. I'm seeking a bit of assurance there about integration and how these things fit together. And a bit like our chair, I am a little confused by this change structure in this proposal, because I'm trying to get my head around basic being preferred and then a category called expanded, which is different from what we've had in other business cases. And actually follow up on the comment that Councillor Ma made about, I agree, undercooked is possible, possibly undercooked. And in order to assist us with that process, I'm wondering whether you could indicate some sort of priority you see in that category expanded. Are there any things in expanded that you would consider to be of higher priority than others if we were going to cook it properly? So, yeah, look, it's a no-brainer. We can't keep kicking this stuff down the road. How many years has this been kicked down the road? It's more than a decade, I think, and 1/3 of our region. I rest my case. Thank you, Councillor Ma, for your summary.
Yeah, I'll just respond to that. In terms of the kind of integration, and as you'll know, that this has been an issue New Zealand wide for decades in terms of the separation between the freshwater and the coastal environment, and how we work in those really kind of transitional low saline or saline influenced environments. But I think the key thing here is that this would, as I say, would be a step change, would be the ability to work in estuaries, to increase our ability to work upstream, to go into those low saline waters, and I think from that, with the right attitude and you know, the ability to do a little bit more kind of cross domain work, we will get there. We work very well with our colleagues, and you know, separation between wetland, you know, freshwater wetlands, coastal wetlands. I still think there's a relatively simple way of pulling those together. In terms of in the expanded thing, the two things that, and again, hearing from yesterday and today, as Councillor Nicol indicated, I probably would extend the Mataronga project from maybe two to 5 years. So you're not necessarily worrying about the following year in the LTP. So there's a signal that there is an ongoing commitment, and then looking at adjusting the budget that when you're determining what's appropriate. Probably the number one thing I would throw in is the the 126,000 for allowing NIWA to undertake the full monitoring of the Firth of Thames rather than us putting a staff member on the boat. Just the logistics around that are already giving me nightmares, headaches to think about that. That would probably be the number one component. No, so this would be in our preferred option. We've said that we will put a crew member on their boat to undertake the runs, which would save $126,119 over 3 years. And again, that was just through the signalling that of cost saving being paramount. That's one, and that would obviously allow us a bit more time for that person not doing that run to do other things around the work program.
Right. So just so I'm
Madam-
clear, on
Sorry,
that.
Madam
sorry.
Chair, if I can make a comment. The way that these business cases were put together was so that there is the basic option, which generally is the preferred option that staff are putting through. Then there is the either better, expanded, additional investment option. So that should there be components of that councillors would like to see popped in and the money come out, that there are options in there for you. I guess the ELT and the business case writers were very mindful of affordability and very mindful of, you know, what a rates take could look like if we brought to you the preferred option being more across the board. So it is purposeful in providing this information because councillors as a whole may select a matter that they feel should be popped in. Great that Mike has provided some ideas in terms of his priorities, in terms of what he would like to advance. But if there are other things, that's the running abacus that Janine runs through these processes for all business cases.
Just in terms of those two that you listed, I'm just making sure I'm on the actual same page. So the NIWA is on 467, right? In that center box. Am I correct? That's the one you're talking about there. And the Mataranga is on 470. I got those correct.
They go on our piece of paper. On our whiteboard.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So just to be clear, the two suggestions that Mike made were the Mātauranga project extending beyond the 2 years that we have it in presently, and the 126K for the NIWA monitoring.
Can you just clarify, because I think on page 470 of the Mātauranga Māori, it talks about an expanded a 9-year to a 9-year project, and I think Mike might have mentioned extending from 2 to 5 years.
Mike mentioned 2 to 5.
Yes, 2 to 5. So that would be an adjusted, expanded option in that regard. Yeah.
Right. So if you had, if you had your druthers, those are the two you'd have us as council focus on if we wanted to go further.
From what I've heard today, yesterday, yes. And then, as Tracy says, the consideration of the other things.
Great. Councillor Cookson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mine was going back to what Councillor Mayor had said also, that these are rivers that go in and out 3 to 4 times a day, and they are on clay silt flats. At this function of the river, most of that silt is actually not coming off farmland, it's actually material that's moving off riverbanks internally in the river and dragged backwards and forwards each day. So I'd hope to think that some of this monitoring is going to put that to bed, that this is not just agriculture land doing this every day and is actually these are how these rivers function, and that this is just a natural way that these rivers function, that it isn't a farmer polluting, because he isn't sending silt 30 or 40 k's down the river because he's on sand, he's not on silt. So it's not him polluting the river up there. This is a river functioning in a tidal zone, that's what it does. So I'd hope to think that when you're doing this research, it's actually going to start showing some of these things.
Maybe respond. One of the great things about my team is a consideration across both space and time, and Dr. Steve Hunt in my team is a bit of a historian on these sorts of things as well. So understanding the previous activities in terms of what happened in those rivers and up in the gorge in terms of the mining and the sediments that came out, a century ago, and it's about integrating what has happened historically with what is happening today in terms of understanding of the river and its interaction with the outer earth. What we do know is that this system over time has changed from being nutrients coming from the oceanic source to now being predominantly from the rivers. And then there's the understanding of how sediments move through these systems over time, and also what improvements today will have over time. We do know that a lot of the sediments which have come out of the rivers are held in that kind of lower firth, either on the flats or are resuspended, and so do come into those rivers under some of these storm events. But it's about managing this whole thing and integrating over space and time. And certainly the monitoring we're doing at the moment, the investigation we're doing at the moment, understanding those kind of spatial temporal dynamics of these rivers, their structures, and how the sediments and nutrients move through them, those dynamics, that's all part of our work program.
Yeah, well, there's millions of cubic meters of settlement moving out of that river that actually isn't coming from the upper catchment every day. And that's what needs to be realised, that it isn't the upper catchment water supply that's doing this. And if that's not in the data that you're going to produce, then it's not worth having.
All right. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hadn't intended to speak on this subject. However, listening to my colleagues, predominantly on the other side of the table, there seems to me to be an issue that should be addressed or raised now and addressed in our deliberation, our final discussions. But the undercooking, to use that phrase, seems to be an issue here. It's been raised in other subjects that we've dealt with up to date. And it would be easy to say we can throw more resource at it. But I think rather than looking at throwing more resource at it, which is probably a good thing, we also need to be thinking now and throughout our further discussions about what we're going to cut out and get rid of, and whether that be a slash of $1 million or $3 or $4 million, and let the chief executive sort out how he's going to manage the business with less money. The other issue is the emphasis on biosecurity and biodiversity, which has come through this one and the one that we dealt with yesterday and lies on the table. Again, I raised the issue of, have we got our committee structures correct to give the focus to biosecurity and biodiversity that we really need? Or how do we manage our committees to deal with that? Because I know we've got it in ICM, but we deal with it in
EPC.
Warren's committee, strategy and policy. So I just want to throw down the challenge for people to think about going forward through these discussions is, are we, like other councils, just throw more dollars into the pot and charge our ratepayers more? Or are we serious about putting more pressure on our chief executive and his team to sweat some more and get the last drop out of the organisation before we burden our ratepayers? So I just wanted to raise those issues. It's a general issue, but it has arisen from this discussion. So there are merits in what my colleagues have said about this issue and whether we're undercooking it. but I just don't want to start throwing more money at it to deal with it and burden the ratepayers. We need to start saying, well, what are we going to sweat with the rest of the organisation? And I throw that challenge to our chief executive and his team to think what they could come up with overnight or the next couple of days. But and I know you might think you've already done enough, but there's always more. So I'm sorry to throw that at you, but I just wanted to raise it. Thank you.
And I suppose I would challenge councillors to say, I mean, from my point of view, the ELT and staff have responded to the previous commentary from this council, and this is what they have put forward. So if councillors, and I agree with you that to date on these, for the most part, we've said, oh, actually, we'd like a little bit more there. And so if we want a little bit more, but don't want a fundamental change in the rating outcome that's already been, the draft rating that's already been put on the table, then we need to signal. Councillors need to signal that actually the basic is too much for us and we're willing to go even, a further cut on something. I'm not saying that's my position. I'm saying that council staff have responded to this council's discussion and direction so far. It is now on us to say, we're willing to go slower on this particular area because we want to go further in another area.
On record as previously saying, this LTP for me is about redistribution towards the priorities of this council, as opposed to throwing a greater burden on the ratepayer. Thank you.
All right, I've got Councillor Nicol again.
Yeah.
And then I've got Councillor Kneebone and Councillor Downard, sorry.
Happy to let others go first. The first.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
I was just going to say in response, it's all well and good, Noel, if we've got somewhere to cut it from, but the reality is we haven't been doing hardly anything in this marine biodiversity space. It really is that simple, and it's all well and good to chuck off at other councils for, I forget the terminology used, but just charging ratepayers more and more. I don't know the details of all the councils that the chair mentioned this morning, but I do know that some of them have done very little, if anything at all, in the planning water quality space. Hence, they're now faced with massive big rate rises to try and catch up to just a very basic level of service. So I think it's all well and good to send staff away to find cuts, but a lot of us we've all been here for over a year now. A lot of us longer. It's up to us to come up with some areas of work that we think we're that council that one or two of us might think we're doing too much, and put those up as suggestions and debate them.
Understand. Great. Okay, I've got Councillor Downard.
Oh, just, yeah, I agree with Noel and Stu. I mean, it's going to be hard for each one of us as a candidate, as a regional councillor, because there's 13 others in here that have got different views, different contingencies of ratepayers and stuff like that. Mine down there, as I said before, I've got a large percentage of retirees. They can only take so much of rate rises going up so far, and yet we've got the responsibility of, all the different entities that we've got, biosecurity, transport, the catchment and everything like that. So it is a hard one. Yesterday we said biosecurity needed more, but that was an extra %. So do we keep on going at extra %, or do we have to chop on something else that we're even still passionate about? I mean, we're passionate about all the entities, to be real. We want the best for the whole of the district. But, again, rate rises, it's always the property people. And we've still got 40% of mortgages to come out of the 3% to go to the 6.9%, which is a huge amount this year. They'll come out in the next 6 months. So, things are going to be tight, so yeah, it's hard for everyone.
Councillor Nicol.
Thanks. And hey, not at all surprised to, every time we do this, that kind of commentary comes up. And I just want to let people know that when I'm looking at adding things extra. I'm trying to understand and dig down into how to make that's proposed the most of what we wanted out of it. Make it the best business case it can be. And then we do the trade-off towards the end of the meeting around priorities. But there's no point trading off things that are not the best they can be. So questions that I just had was, it said there that mesotrophic deep over 50-meter reefs are out of scope. I was just wondering why, and is it a large part of the region?
Yeah, sure. So that's one of the areas where I think we're best probably partnering with other people and using our influence as opposed to necessarily using our dollars. One of the reasons they're often a bit further offshore, more difficult environments, more expensive environments to get to. So the deep reefs off the Mercs, for example, or out of the Ordamans. Often just working in deep water, it's just really tricky in terms of the amount of cable you have to put out, the size of the vessel, the ability to lift equipment back up. So it just kind of raises the kind of the cost and the complexity and the challenge to us. So yeah, our focus is more on those specifically in terms of the kind of mapping and the monitoring of those kind of shallow reef systems. We do work closely. I have meetings with DOC and Auckland Council monthly, and there are plans to across the Hauraki Gulf in terms of the various actions that are happening at central level. We are kind of talking and working together. So I think that's an area where, as I say, we can use our influence more than our dollars.
Okay. And is it much of our region? Like, is it much?
As a
With
percent,
most of it quite shallow. Is it more like more than 50% or less than 50% would be deep? Sorry.
probably more, so it would be a small percentage which are deep reef systems. Predominantly it'll be kind of deep soft sediments or kind of in that 50 to 70 meter range. I can provide you a map at some point. I'm just curious, but yeah, we do have a number of those deeper reef systems, and we're often slightly less confident in exactly what's there. So
It'd
yeah,
be quite cool to in 3 years' time or 6 years' time to look more. The other question I had was around the other items that I mentioned about that I thought looked really interesting, that above the two that you mentioned, which was the rocky reef health and the intertidal habitat mapping. Were they very high on your list of also being important?
so that's
Is that just me?
yeah. So in terms of the intertidal habitat mapping one, I just make it clear. In terms of the expanded option there, really, I think that the best option is actually us doing the work in house, which was the preferred option, and through that FTE.
Yeah.
The expanded option was just really saying, actually, if we're not going to do this ourselves, this is the kind of cost you would be getting someone external to do that work, and really emphasizing that it is quite expensive to do externally.
That's all good. Do we still get the increased frequency though in that preferred option?
Yes, we would have to just work through the logistics of that. It might not quite be at 5 yearly. Our intention would be to do it, regularly. Again, we would have to see how that worked with the staff that we had. Yeah.
Yeah. No, the reason it came up for me was because I thought, okay, so over 10 years you've lost, as an example, the 99.5% seagrass in this area. If you actually then also want to respond to that in any way that's meaningful, that frequency obviously might need to be shorter, and so that was important to me. And what about the reef health?
Reef health, yeah. And yeah, on the point around what's changing, over time, one of the things could be to prioritize the mapping of estuaries, harbours that are changing more quickly than others which have been relatively static over time. So there is a kind of hybrid model there. And yeah, ideally, as you say, you would be intervening before the big problems, not being the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. Specifically with someone like Wharekawa, and Councillor Mayer may also know, in Tairua, we suspect that seagrass has died over a relatively short period, likely probably more than one stressor, but suspect that some of the heat waves that we've had in those very kind of shallow intertidal systems has probably been the nail in the coffin for seagrass in those examples. I suspect we're never just looking at one stressor, it will be an integration of those. In terms of the expanded kind of the reef program there, yeah, again, from an area of work that we haven't really done so far, for me, the key thing was actually just getting the mindset that we are going to do something, that it is part of our remit. And so that's probably where that kind of that middle option kind of sat. This is always one of those things that you could throw as much money as you wanted at it and always do a bigger and better job. Actually, I think there probably is, a good reason to do a little bit more, to work a little bit more on those high value kind of offshore islands, to do a bit more work where we're not limited to just the coast.
Can I just ask, is the Fertile Lagoon covered in the preferred option? And I've read so much.
It's not covered in the preferred option. That is part of the expanded option. One of the reasons being that that does actually require a bit of thought as to how we tackle it. It's not quite so simple as just monitor it. Actually, there is a bit more work in terms of investigation and working into what has caused the problem.
Okay, so based on all of that, I'd advocate for the basic option and additional, the two things that. Thank you.
Great. All right. I don't have anybody else with lights on. So if we just, if we look at this particular business case, we recognize that this is about how we deliver on all of that work that went in last triennium and this triennium in developing our coastal plan and ensuring that we can meet our obligations in that space, also alongside the state of the environment report. I think that what I've heard from councillors is general support and recognition that we've got some obligations there that this business case could address. We've been offered a couple of options if we wanted to add some more. So thank you for that prioritization, because that's really helpful for us. It allows us to weigh up all of the pluses and the minuses, as Councillor Smith was talking about before. So thank you very much for that. Yes. Well, other than that, you had talked about a scaling on the Mataranga from to 5 years as opposed to 10 years. So just making sure that we know that cost implication so that we can consider it.
Yep, we can provide those figures very easily. Yep.
Right. Yes.
Really short, really brief.
Really short.
Yeah, I think for me, Mike, the critical thing is where you see any increased value, to come through, regardless of what you've heard around the council chamber, and whether that's Matarangi Maori or whatever it is, but where you guys see the value. And the other thing I'd just like to really emphasise is what Bruce and Chris touched on, and to all ELT, we've got to close that loop. So this information we're getting back has got to feed back into how we look at things that are actually causing these issues.
Yeah.
So that, to me, is really critical, closing that loop. We seem to do something with the left hand, but don't tell the right hand. Vice versa. Thank you.
Good stuff. Hey, thank you very much for that. Much appreciated. All right, now we are going to move on to critical infrastructure. This is on page 44 and in the report, and page 490 in terms of the business case. Item 14.7 is the business case.
So, Madam Chair, just following on from the December workshop, the business case has been updated, including the elements of engagement that our elected members wanted us to refer to in the business case. For me, it's a bit of a no-brainer, given the conversations that council have had, clear linkage through to both our infrastructure strategy and our financial strategy. Is purposefully a 2-year project in order to feed into and make sure that the thinking is done prior to those conversations that we'll have in the next LTP. Mr. Keenan is with me here to answer any questions as the author of the business case.
And this is funded from prior year surplus
Correct.
because it is short-term in nature. So, any questions or people happy? Yes? Good? Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Smith.
Or Greg, Robbie and I discussed this the other day, and we just wanted to absolutely make certain that land drainage is included. I think it's inferred, but just absolutely it's included.
Just looking for confirmation?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Absolutely support. Thank you.
All right, and again, we don't all, if everybody's supportive, we don't all need to say that we're supportive. Can I just get some nods and we can move on? But understand if people want to make a particular statement. Ooh, and the light was off. I like that. Oh. No, I'm just, if we can move on, that would be helpful. Oh. We need a light.
I'm 100% supportive, but to me, the important issue is getting the right person and to get somebody external to do the work. It's critical.
Can I just clarify what this project is? This project is a review of how we pay for and who pays for infrastructure. Just on the back of the previous comment, I just don't want it confused with a review of how we're organised and how we deliver some services through integrated catchment management. I just want to make sure that's very clear. Blair, can you comment on how you had planned that this would be delivered?
Sorry, I just need to get Blair a mic.
Well, I suppose it, we'd be planning on tendering for an external consultant to review the existing ways that we do it. So because there are different models for different schemes, we'd be looking at reviewing whether it was appropriate to improve the consistency between those. And so under the preferred option, the initial phase would be, I guess, a bit like a desktop exercise. We would review our existing systems. We'd look at alternative models that other councils might have or that we might be able to find elsewhere. Say we, the consultant, the successful tenderer. And then the sort of second phase of the project would be to test that. So effectively through going out and engaging with the people who are actually affected by the schemes. But that's kind of the nutshell.
Would this also include potentially making recommendations to central government around how this infrastructure might be funded going forward?
I think
if there are some similarities with other regions,
I think it's almost certainly going to provide useful information for that. So I know that there has been a lot of work by the sector to try and persuade central government that that their institutions receive a lot of benefit from these schemes.
So that could be an outcome of this, that we've got further data information to go to central government and say, here's what we're dealing with, and here's how you might help us to address that, right? Okay. All right. General support? Yes? Yes? Sorry, is that Stu? Sorry, Councillor, oh.
So I'm not sure if this is a question for you or not, Blair, but my question's around timing. I mean, there was a report came out this morning on the radio. I didn't hear it, but others have been talking about it. That emission rates from Train Pete are nearly double what they previously thought they were. Are you comfortable that we've got enough information? Because it's quite critical in terms of, as you well know, is some of this infrastructure sustainable long term, the way it's currently funded? If there was a change to the funding mechanism, that could change the dynamics of whether or not it was affordable. But then if you factor in a whole lot of other stuff, around environmental concerns, sea level rise and things like that, that changes the dynamics yet again, you know. So you probably get the gist of what I'm asking, eh? And I suppose part of that is how long is it since we last did this? Was it back in the project watershed days 2 decades ago, I think, wasn't it? So there's a limit to how long we can go on without reviewing it. I get that, yeah.
Yeah.
If I could just comment, so it's a very good point you make. And I think that Tracy prefaced with this with the whole infrastructure strategy review, along with what we're trialing with the CITIF project. Along with this, it kind of has to tie together somehow.
Yeah.
I think that's acknowledged, and I don't know, Blair or Tracy, if you've got any comment about how we might be trying to blend it.
Other than the fact that I've been working closely with the staff who are involved in writing the infrastructure strategy, and the regional resilience team where the sustainable infrastructure decision-making framework sits. And I'll be continuing to work closely with them.
I guess what I'm taking from that is a signal that councillors are wanting to pick up on what Councillor Marr was saying about we have the right hand doing something, the left hand doesn't know. It's clear that this is integrated with a number of other aspects of the LTP that are in front of us. We're looking for assurance that there is, I don't know,
Phasing.
that the phasing, the timing, the connectivity between the teams that is working, that are working on these different aspects, that it's a unified, we're all bringing our good information together so that we can take the region forward, you know, more judiciously, right?
And look, I'll be quite upfront, and I know this is going to upset some individuals. There were comments made right at Christmas that the cost of running our drainage network, particularly environmental constraints, didn't exist 10 years ago or 20 years ago, are making it prohibitive, so it should be general rate funded. Well, I'm sorry, my view is that isn't a good reason to heave more costs onto the general ratepayer because everyone has drains to clean on land. It's just the fact that some of them have to be coordinated, you know. So I just want to make sure that we're doing this in a really transparent and constructive way that can stand scrutiny, you know.
That isn't what that discussion was about. That was discussion that the land drainage area that all of the community were getting to use, yet we're not contributing to it. That's what that discussion was, Stu. You've taken that way out of bounds.
So, okay,
no,
but I think
with
we're clear. We're
respect,
clear on what we're trying to achieve here.
Yeah, with respect, I'm just being really upfront. I had a very frank conversation with Noel yesterday. He knows where I sit. I know where he sits, and I'm just being transparent here. I'm
Understood.
not having a crack at anyone.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Are we, I don't want to get distracted on that. It's either we're supporting or opposing this. That's the commentary I'm looking for
I haven't even got to speak on it.
I understand that. I'm just giving you an indication that if you're going to speak, that's what I want you to hold your comment to. Yeah. And we've heard that.
And making sure that
we've heard
that my views are heard as part of this process. And I'm confident I've had a really good hearing, and thank you.
Great. Councillor Cookson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support this, but if there's not institutional knowledge from targeted ratepayers involved in this, it will fail. So I'll take it out to our CEO. If you want this to work, it is going to have a targeted group of targeted ratepayers that will help you with their institutional knowledge, or else it will not. It will just be something you're directing to the community, and they'll just say, bullshit.
So can we get some clarity on involvement of stakeholders in this piece of work?
Madam Chair, we haven't scoped up an engagement plan, obviously, in great detail because we need to have some certainty around the dollars and support or otherwise. Part of your instruction to us in December was to make sure that there is robust engagement that is provided for, and that will be across the board for everybody, including our targeted ratepayers, who will be impacted by the funding of critical infrastructure. This project, like the others we've talked about previously, has no preconceived outcomes, has no preconceived ideas or biases. The whole purpose is to get as much input across the spectrum to get good information to inform the next LTP. And
Yeah, if I could, the stakeholder engagement section of the document on page 508 of the agenda lists general ratepayers and targeted ratepayers as the first two items on the list. But certainly the intent is to do that.
Great. Fabulous. All right. Again, let's not belabor the point, but, sorry, are you finished, Councillor Cookson?
thank you.
Good. Just hit your light there. I've got Councillor Nicol and Councillor Clarkson, but again, we're sensing support, so that you're good. Councillor Clarkson.
I'm in support, but I just needed to get that well, I don't need the assurance. I trust the staff to ensure it's about the lens that is brought to bear on this topic. It's about the lens, it's about the knowledge and expertise of the external consultants. And just the brief will be critical. The brief will be critical. These guys know that, and I'm counting on them to do it in a way that really does explore these options to the fullest extent. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. We'll now move on to item 14.8. So this is understanding and adapting to natural hazard risks. This is page 45 in the report. Item 14.8, page 510 in business case.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Morena, councillors. So this particular business case, it is a renamed one. It was previously named Regional Resilience. We have named it Understanding and Adapting to Natural Hazard Risk, primarily because resilience is such a broad topic, and it was felt that this title better represents what this business case is covering. There are two main aspects to this business case in terms of the work that we do. One is the natural hazard information that we collect to understand our hazards, our risks, and what it looks like out in the community. The second and probably the most important part is how we work with our communities to work on their risks, to understand what they mean, and to look at developing adaptation plans going forward. And we've got a number of great examples of projects where we have been involved in, such as Wharikawa, Thames Coast, Port Waikato, to name a few. This business case builds on a decision that council made in 2021 as part of the long-term plan to lift, quite significantly lift the resourcing in this area by $500,000 per year. And so that decision was made by council in recognition of a lot of the same issues that we're seeing today. What this business case is about and the recommended option that is presented to you is, it is effectively the status quo, although it does require a small lift in funding to return to the decision that council made in 2021. The reason for that is there was a reduction in budget during this current annual plan, just to recognise the progress that had been made. So what you see is basically a proposal to reinstate the budget for this particular work program to the additional $500,000 that council committed to in 2021, but also a small reuse of that budget to incorporate an additional staff member to assist with the implementation of the program and the realisation of the benefits that were initially envisaged in 2021. It is a basic option, and I guess one of my challenges with this particular area is that I don't think that the program is still in a building phase. It is still yet to really realise some of the benefits that were envisaged when the commitment was made by council in 2021. And so what this proposal to you today reflects is a need to continue with that commitment over the next 3 years to really make sure that those benefits are realised. It also reflects, and you'll see in the business case throughout, a greater recognition of the interaction between this work and our sustainable infrastructure decision-making framework, because a lot of the same concepts that are applied to our communities also apply in terms of the challenges that we face in that space.
And lastly, it also requires a bit of a focus from being less reactive and more proactive. I guess at the moment, as a council, we do react to where there is community desire and need to engage in processes such as what we've seen over the last 3 years. We also have a lot of really good information that allows us to understand where our risks are, where our hotspots are, and therefore where we need to look at some more proactive engagement with our communities so that we can help to prioritise the resource that we have available in the space. I will pause there, Madam Chair, and await discussion.
Councillor Nicol.
Thank you. And thanks for good renaming. Having been involved in this quite a bit and as chair of climate action, obviously, I have quite a bit of background knowledge on some of the work and some of the climate stuff that's driving it. I noticed that the ideal option fully meets, which is the 2 steps away from the status quo that you're saying is what we is currently being proposed by ELT. I thought it was a bit difficult from the papers to ascertain what the difference in cost is between the status quo, the intermediate and the ideal, just from the way that these are laid out. Could you help me with that?
The primary difference between, so there's three different options that are provided. I guess when you look at the breakdown of, so the next option involves some fixed term resource.
Yeah.
So I think 3 resource, so that would be, in the order of $300,000 to $400,000 per year over that period. And what that option represented was, I guess, a bit more of a focused effort from the team over that period, recognising that I guess we need to do a bit of extra work in the short term to get things moving, get them into a much better place. I don't have the figures to hand in terms of what the ultimate option was, but it did involve a
Ideal
significant
was
number
5.5 FTEs.
Yeah.
So should I just extrapolate to 700,000 or 600?
It'll be in that order, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, when I read through the risks of not being able to meet the goal that we set in the strategic direction, that's also what led towards wanting to advocate for the ideal option, and reasons that I picked out from your papers here was it would be region wide, which I think brings a real fairness across us spreading our attention equally based on a risk thing, as we always do, but giving the fair chance to everybody in our region to be able to start these conversations and get this information for them. The fact that work happens faster, obviously. I've had, I think, 3 or 4 or so local climate change risk assessment delays every climate action committee meeting because Rick was pulled away with the Cyclone Gabriel and other events. And so the risk of always being delayed in this is something I'd like to mitigate due to the fact that we haven't built that internal capacity wider than 1, if not 2 people. And I think with so many other things going on in this changing world, being able to get this information to our communities to adapt faster would be really beneficial to them because it gives that investment certainty. The sooner the communities around our region decide what their plan is, the sooner you know whether we're going to be protecting this or not protecting that and everything else, which then gives that investment certainty. And also the risk mentioned here about not locking in infrastructure investments that wouldn't be suitable. So while we're waiting to do this work, the risk is that someone has a bright idea for another road here or another building there, which might then have to move after the community does its work. So I'm advocating for it being done relatively quickly. The reason I like the iwi resilience specialist in the ideal case is because I hear from our iwi partners that there are many marae who are ready to go. They're just saying, we're just getting on with it. And so there is that piece, but the engagement specialist that was in there for one of the FTEs, I think is super critical because it comes back to the same argument we're making in the STIF and the other bits and pieces where we say hard conversations need to be had. They need to be done well in consistency and with good relationships. So having a permanent staff member to do that engagement on this piece of work would really pay off to do it well.
Okay, sorry, I'm just trying to make sure I'm following.
yeah, sure.
What so are you, so this preferred status quo includes an additional FTE. Are you talking about additional FTEs on top of
Yeah,
that?
so if you look at the table of the 3 options, it's not the colourful table, although you're welcome to look at that too. It's the other one before it on page 540 and onwards or so.
I can
And it
refer,
just-
refer to 539, there's a table that outlines.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And no, I am just listing off the reasons why it's better so that it's been said. And I'm almost done, no. The decreased reliance on contractors. So it's a point we make in a lot of the business cases. And having the best possible options explored. There's a risk mentioned in the status quo option that says, and even in the intermediate option that says we might not be able to explore all the options for the communities. And I think that would be letting our communities down because it's to do with their livelihoods, it's to do with their infrastructure, and it's to do with their homes and their place where they live. So I think we should do this piece of work really well.
So you're
in
advocating for the
support.
ideal.
Yeah, I am. I'm just putting
And
forward.
just so we're clear, the additional
Cost would be
cost.
600,000 to 700,000 or something.
In that order, yes.
6 to
And
700,000 over the whole 10 years,
per
or
year.
6 to 700,000 per year for the next 10 years?
Yes, so the ideal option involves a number of additional roles to the team on a number of fronts. And so that's where the cost would come from. This particular activity is general rate funded.
And as
So
I've
the inflation.
framed, I'm saying this as Chair of Climate Action. I feel I really need to. Basically on the background of as well, seeing some of the data from 2023, which is showing that there's some real things to adapt to. So I'm going to leave it there for now. I just wanted to put that out there. I just want to hear from others what they think about all of that. And I'd be just welcoming the staff to say where they would land with their recommendation after they've heard everybody. But that's me having said my piece. Thank you.
Got it. Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
Thank you. Well, seeing we're stating opinions, I fundamentally disagree with Nicole there. I think this is a sound proposal as it is. It's not asking too much money. The thing we have to remember here is that we didn't get a say in the CDM asking for 4 additional staff, one of whom is an iwi person and one of whom is liaison. So when you look at the 5 staff she's advocating here, 4 of them have already been given to CDM, which was mandated upon us. We didn't get a say about whether we were going to vote on that or not. So I think that we should stick with what we've got here, and that bear in mind what Michaela was saying earlier about, I mean, where I come from, Pyra was one of the lowest income areas, Tiara was low income. I don't really agree with everyone picking the juiciest, biggest option without coming up with some solutions about where they're going to cut from.
Councillor Marr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just echo Ben's sentiments. Going through the Wharekoa coast work and also my work in TCDC, I totally back our staff experience and what we've got there. Alejandro is excellent and that sort of thing. So I do believe we have staff capability in that space. I do believe a lot of the communities are going to have similar issues. So we've already got principles that we've laid out on the way we handle these sorts of things. We've got this experience that we're working through now. These projects are quite a way down the track. So I would support the status quo as it stands as well. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Ben, I just want to raise an issue with you're talking about the CDM. CDM has got its own legislation, and the group situation, which is all councils plus the regional council in the region, are responsible for providing regional response. Some years ago, when I was a member of CDM, the collective councils were unanimous in bringing the rating of civil defence within the CDM, and the vehicle that CDM uses is the regional council. And whilst the regional council has the ultimate say on whether it will undertake that rating on behalf of CDM, CDM is charged in the legislation with certain roles that they must do. And to achieve those roles, this request has come forward, I still keep in touch with civil defence. So I've got some understanding of it and from where the genesis came from. So the reality is, whilst it may not be palatable because it's 4 more staff for the regional council, the reality is through the legislative process and an agreement by all the councils in the region, it sits within this budget. So I don't really think it's apples with apples.
I hear your point. How, do you have any thoughts on this particular business
I'm
case?
neutral on this, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Neutral as in you support what's before us now, or the staff recommendation? Yeah. Well, that's helpful. That's helpful. Counselor Strange.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Greg, for the report. Can you just reading through the report, the status quo looks good until you come to the risks, and the risks in the status quo are numerous for that status quo, and then intermediate and ideal are less based on who you choose to fill those roles. So can you just give me a level of comfort around those risks that you've listed for the status quo?
Just to direct our attention, where are the risks you're referring to? Highlight
543.
543.
Yeah, and there are certainly, I mean, those are real. And I guess it comes down to the level of effort that council is ready to put into this particular area. As I said, at the moment, I guess my advice to you is that council did make quite a big lift in investment in this area in the past during 2021. And I think there is still more work to do to realise those benefits fully before we take further steps. In the meantime, it's going to be around making sure that we prioritise our work to where it's needed. And I spoke about being a little less reactive and a little bit more proactive in terms of where we put those resources. The other challenge, which I think Councillor Nicol touched on, was often this program can be disrupted by events that come along, and I guess that's a broader business challenge, not only for this part of the directorate, but for the organisation in terms of building depth. It's certainly not reliant on one person. We do have a number of staff members that support the Regional Resilience Program, all of which are also building their depth in terms of event response and management. It's an area that we are looking at as an organisation as well, because there are some fundamental skill sets in the emergency management space that we are committed to provide as an organisation. So it really comes down to I guess cutting our cloth to fit the resources that are available, making sure that we're prioritising them in the right place, and then making sure that I guess our stakeholders and our communities understand what we can and can't engage in.
Okay. Is there the option to say in year 4 to step up into a more aggressive program in this, rather than keeping the status quo for the whole 10 years?
Absolutely, if that's the if that has the support of council. Yeah.
Yeah, just given what Councillor Nicol's points on, the intensification of weather events and different things that we are seeing in the climate space as well. Acknowledging as well the affordability in the next 3 years. That could be a good middle ground, perhaps moving forward, but open to hear other people's ideas. Just lastly, can you just help me understand the FTEs that are listed here and what we've heard from other councillors about CEDAM? Are they the same roles, or is these FTEs, is this a different project?
I don't have enough background on the CDM roles to speak to the overlap, unfortunately. But certainly civil defence, and there is a natural overlap between civil defence and regional resilience in terms of the work that they do. But there is also quite distinct roles and responsibilities, particularly in terms of working with the community. Council has much more of a leadership role in this space in terms of leading that process and developing our hazard information, as opposed, I guess, to some of the specific roles that sit with the group civil defence and also local civil defence. So there'll naturally be some overlaps, but I don't think there's a full overlap there.
So would you say that these FTEs are more proactive and then CEDAM would be responsive?
No,
both?
proactive in a different way.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, civil defence covers all the R's, and so they are certainly involved in community resilience discussions as well.
Thanks for, yeah.
If I could just comment on that, they are different roles. They're not being budgeted. Civil defence roles aren't being budgeted or proposed in two places. So I just want to make that clear, quite separate. I think, what we're looking at here is that maybe it is how fast we can run. And that, we did put resources in here a bunch of years ago. We struggled to utilise all of that. And we're probably at a point now, Greg, I'm just looking for your confirmation where we think we can start to deliver more fully on this. And I think that in recommending put the money back to what we had in the last LTP, additional resource, is helping us get to that place where we can start moving forward. It's a good point that will we be in a place in a few years' time we need to go a bit faster. That's very possible. I don't know if you've got any comment on that, Greg, whether we want to forecast that now or wait till that time. And I think that the key is we do need to understand our hazards in the region, and have a very good evidential solid base before we do too much going forward.
Yeah, look, I mean, I can see, given the nature of the issues that this work program is dealing with, I can see some benefit to signalling a lift in the level of effort from council in outer years. It would also help our various partner agencies who get involved in these conversations to know what that what that trajectory will look like. There is, of course, always the next long-term plan to consider that, but the more that we can, signal where we're heading, the more that our partners can also align themselves and be prepared for it.
I think that from my perspective, it's a really good idea to signal, because I just reflect on just the time that, that I've been involved in this. The number of communities who are asking for us to engage in these conversations is increasing. Every evidence, the evidence that's put before us would suggest that that is going to continue. And we've already had conversations yesterday about how do we illustrate to our communities that we're not just planning for the next 3 years, we're planning for the much longer term. So I think that that's certainly something for us to consider. Councillor Kneebone.
Yeah, okay. So I guess philosophically, and I hear what you're saying, Ben, but it's often the impoverished communities that are the most heavily affected by a lot of these events as well, and we need to remember that. And I'm tending to side with Jen. However, I suppose just in the last 5 minutes, Chris and Greg, you've kind of tempered my enthusiasm a little bit. I obviously need to be able to continue the work program at a sustainable pace, and we can't run before we can walk, sort of thing. I guess I think we all find it really frustrating, the amount of development we see around New Zealand in places that we know it shouldn't be happening, and we see it time and time again, and there's a whole bunch of tensions that drive that you have to acknowledge as well. But I guess from you, Greg, and Chris and co, I'm looking for some assurance that we are progressing this program of work as quickly as we can, because we're as you mentioned, Greg, we are seen as leaders in this space, and we've got an obligation and a duty to be out front and be guiding well thought out strategic development.
Yeah, absolutely we are. And it comes on top of the effort, I guess, even pre-2021, in terms of the involvement we have in decision-making processes, providing information so that various decision makers can make better decisions around land use change. I think the challenge in terms of the outcomes that we see from those processes is often we're not the decision maker, and there are lots of other factors that come in. And so we do from time to time see some decisions that do raise our eyebrows, but we're certainly making sure we're putting our best foot forward, making sure we're understanding what's out there, working very closely with Tracy's team as well in the policy area to understand where there are plan changes, and really coming at this from a team point of view as well.
I find it immensely frustrating that I think if a lot of the individual homeowners knew of the risks where they're living, that I think some of their TAs have been quite negligent in allowing them to develop. We know that, eh? And I rode a bicycle through Papamoa in the weekend day, and it's, geez. Fucking houses are sitting about 2 meters above the road because the road's designed so the fucking sea can flush in there, It's.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So in general, so far, I'm hearing support for the status quo, though recognizing that there's some future work ahead of us. We want to make sure we signal that. So I guess looking for any feedback of anyone who is not supporting that sort of a direction. Councillor Clarkson.
Yeah, I think this is one where I have to admit, it's so complex and it's got so many components to it that, you know, I'm still not really sort of hearing how it's all hanging together. And I think that might be possibly what Stu was getting at a bit as well. Because the intervention logic here is you have a strategic plan and then that means that all of your problems go away. Well, we know that doesn't quite do it. And we also know that right now people could be making decisions about not building houses on floodplains and all the rest. So resilience is something that should be happening now. You know, building resilience should be happening in every decision-making process that we're running in the council already. Without a strategic plan, yeah, it might give us an overarching guidance and all the rest, but how long do we have to wait for a strategic plan? And when we do get it, will it actually improve the intervention logic? That's all. I'm just not quite there yet. I know we need something,
Yeah.
but I'm not quite sure yet.
And I think that I'm sensing that all of us are wanting that, right? We're all wanting to understand how all of these business cases hang together. Because we do see similar things coming up in multiple business cases. So I think we've been loud and clear that this council wants to ensure that as we're making these decisions, that they are complementary and building on one another, and that if we're making any decisions on individual ones where we might be scaling up or scaling back, we need to understand as council, we need to understand any implications on the other business cases that are connected, but also just signaling that the expectation is that all of these are leading us to a better place in the future, whether that's us having the right information, us being able to communicate with the various stakeholders in our communities to ensure that we're delivering on our statutory requirements as well as the expectation of our communities. Right, I've got Councillor Nicol, Councillor Cookson, and Councillor Smith again. I
Very real quick. I just
Yeah.
wanted to round off that I appreciate all the feedback that's been given to when I put that challenge out there. I said what I had to say as chair of that committee. And I like the things that you've summarised there, and that staff will come back to us if they feel that there is a time to wrap things up. And the question I'd put out there just to the ELT would be, what are you looking at proposing in the consultation document around this? Because to me, a logical thing would be to ask the community whether they want to go slow or fast kind of thing. It's kind of, you know, it's their call, it's their thing. Or are you envisaging something else? Like, do we fund it? Do we not? That kind of thing. Yeah.
So through you, Madam Chair,
Thanks.
I think my understanding, I think Janine's just said it, is this wasn't proposed to be a specific consultation
Oh, right,
document?
gotcha.
Sorry, consultation topic.
Okay.
Is it?
So it's
No,
kind of
it's-
just built into the LTP.
If I could just
Thank
add to
you.
that, so I think that yesterday morning, Janine sort of themed up, you know, kind of what this LTP is about, and is about resilience and trying to make our region resilient for the future, not just in the sense of resilience in a adaptation space here, but in the
Yeah,
wider sense
natural
of
hazard.
the likes of biodiversity, biosecurity, the coastal marine, and that's where we had pitched that we could put some extra resources along a little bit here, but it is a wider resilience story. You know, we're trying to make the Waikato better in the future, making it more resilient
Yeah,
today.
thanks.
And so that will be a theme. Janine, the question was just asked, would we have a consultation topic around this, seeing what the community think about
How fast they want it.
how fast we want to go?
Or is that kind of built into the general feedback we're asking for? Should be fine. It's just.
for consultation, we just need to be really clear on what questions we're asking the
Yeah.
community.
If
And we
don't-
need to have options to garner their feedback on. So if you want to consult, I guess the option that staff had recommended was really the continuation or reverting back to what we had in 2021. So I don't think there's consultation on that.
Required.
It is if you're, yeah, we just need to be really clear in crafting exactly what we're asking for feedback on, because otherwise it's not actually consultation. Well, it comes this week. So what we need through this process is clarity. I think probably not necessarily on the exact questions, but on the nature of the feedback that council is wanting on which topics, so that staff need to draft all of that to come back to you on the 29th of February for that draft consultation document to be adopted or approved for audit. So that is part of the wrap that we need through this week. Yep.
All right. I do want to get us to a break. So just signaling that. I've got Councillor Cookson, Councillor Smith, and Councillor Downard. Councillor Cookson.
I'm prepared to support as it is up there. And I know how this is already affecting my communities. I've already have been rung about 5 properties that are having trouble getting building consents just because of the just flood protection data that's come out, and then Matamata Piako and that said, well, now you can't build there, and all these are the provisions that you got to. So communities are going to go through some pain. So I think this is far enough for now, and then you'll take the next step in the future of where it needs to go to from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith,
Yeah.
have you come away from your neutral stance? Are you going to be up front now? Sorry.
I've had time to listen to the discussion and form a view.
Good.
Isn't that what we're here to do? I support probably where Robbie's coming from. Is there enough? But can I just throw in this as well? We've got so many business cases that are really important. We're doing the ICM review. The infrastructure strategy is yet to be discussed. The peatland outcomes right at the back of the agenda. The replacement of pumps are coming up in the integrated catchment. Millions and millions of dollars to be spent. But should they be, we're looking at that if we look at the infrastructure strategy yet to be discussed, we look at retreating from the land, natural heritage and all that. What I'm starting to get concerned about is who's going to be coordinating this, who's going to be bringing it all together. And I see silos in this organisation. I've been associated with this organisation for 28 years in different ways, from land drainage through to being a councillor. So there are silos, and I know there's been work to break those down. But this huge piece of work, or piece of the work that we're looking to do, I am starting to really get concerned, because ultimately, if the peatland outcomes are saying that because of CO2 emissions, etc., we should retreat from land, then should we be even thinking about pumps and the likes? We need to have some sort of plan in place. And so my concern is who's coordinating
that integration.
Yeah. We might have integrated catchment, but I sat around the drainage table for so long saying unless drainage is at the river, because we don't have drains without rivers and we don't have rivers without drains, it's not integrated. So I really do have a problem in understanding how all this is going to be pulled together, and whether the chief executive can respond to that or whether he wants to right now. But I'm just raising it that this is a really important, but there's so much to the land use going forward in the next 30, 50 years could all hinge on what we're deciding now.
Yeah, and as I was saying before, that is the message I hope ELT is hearing from council, that we see overlaps, we see connectivity between these things. We need to make sure that as a council, we're clear on how all of this is going to be delivered in an integrated manner.
And certainly what you'll see in this updated business case, which is updated from 2021, is a much more explicit acknowledgement of the connection to our infrastructural challenges. to make sure that actually they are working hand in hand, as opposed to necessarily some of the community adaptation processes that we've been involved in that were outside of those areas. It's critical that the two work together.
Councillor Dennard.
I'd like to just first congratulate staff through all the workshops that we had last year. Councillors, this document that we've gone through, the 754 pages, is virtually through the workshop is what we've asked for staff. And they've come back with a great number as far as I'm concerned of 6.8. And, I think we've been a little bit harsh on staff because we keep on saying, well, this is the baseline, but there's always better, but it all comes back to a cost. So, first of all, I'll just say to the staff, everyone that, I think this document that you've come back is from all the workshops that were done. And secondly, I just endorse what Janine said, is that I'm very wary to ask questions in consultation, because the way that you word questioning, you get a certain answer. And, I'd hate for that to dictate on our decisions after consultation. That's what we're here for. We're here to decide what goes in the consultation out to the public, and then the public to then ask their own questions and come with that information back to us. So that's just a couple of comments.
Great. All right. So just to summarize, what I'm hearing is general support for the status quo alongside an indication that this is not going to be fixed tomorrow or in the next 3 years, that this is, that we need to be signaling to our communities that this is that there is a longer term commitment required. Wait a minute, have I gotten myself confused? Have I got myself confused? I don't know. I'm looking at you as I'm trying to summarize, and you're looking at me like, what are you talking about, Pamela?
So what's going through my mind is how that signal is made, I suppose.
Yeah.
So at the moment, through our budget, we've got a baseline status quo across the whole 10 years. The discussion has been whether around year 4 we need to signal some additional resource coming there or not, because there are those additional roles and additional options that have been included in the business case, which do provide a framework for lifting our effort. So I guess I'm in the hands of yourselves about what we include or not.
Yeah, so I guess that what I'm hearing is support that in year 4, we are signaling that this will require a greater level of investment from this organization in this region to meet the growing needs and concerns. Equally, there's that integration piece and making sure that that we see how all of these bits hang together. All right. With that, I really want to take a break. What?
I just wouldn't support jumping an extra $700,000 in year 4. But that's what the 5 extra staff proposed mean. So maybe it's 300 instead of, it doubles from 150 to, it's an extra staff member rather than 5.
Can I?
Right. Okay.
May I say, I don't require the money to be there of, guesswork of year 4 onwards. It's just that the ELT take away that when they feel that there are more than just TAs that are coming to us, there are 11 in our region. Over time, this will ramp up. Come back to us and ask for more when you need more. That's all I ask. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to adjourn for 10 minutes. We'll be back at 11:30 and crack on to public transport.